Right. Um, what do you think explains like the U.S. political class and European political class are solidly pro-Zionist? Netanyahu had a really shameful speech before Congress. I went to D.C. I was at the protest, arrest Netanyahu protest. But I had 20, I don't know how many people there, 20, 30,000 people. There was really good attendance, but the political class in the U.S. at almost all levels almost ignores the fact that there's genocide going on, that there are heartbreaking atrocities every other day, and they practically like totally ignore it. And similar thing going in Europe, in the UK, and in the European Union. What explains this? Why they don't even
Yeah,
budge an inch? It's odd.
I think in Europe and European Union is a little bit different because there are political forces there that have been anti-Zionist and socialist and communist and Marxist uh, but certainly at the level in the United States, throughout the culture and at the higher levels of political and media and economic power, thoroughly Zionist. And I think this is something people have to understand. And there is, and it has been built up by the ideological apparatuses for 76 years. And until 10 months ago, it was accepted just as a matter of course. Zionism, Joe Biden says I'm a Zionist. Don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. He's right. And most Americans and everybody who ever got to any power, any level of political power in this country, or ideological power in terms of control of the ideological apparatuses of the state and the media, including so-called private media, has been a Zionist. And this was based. Think they're good for that. You have to recognize this. This is based on the ideological assumption that was hammered into people that this is the necessary compensation for Hitler and for the Holocaust, and this is the necessary compensation that Europeans and Americans have to pay is to support Zionism. And if you do that, you're a good person. You're proving that you're anti-racist and you're not anti-Semitic. And you're a good and you're alleviating any guilt you'll have because they're going to make you feel guilty if you don't. You're the anti-Semite if you're not anti-Zionist. If you're anti-Zionist, and this is you've got to see the power of the ideological apparatus and the power of guilt. These people, everybody, really. This was done. An article about it. Tom Hayden running for state assembly in California. He had to be brought by Howard Berman, who was the senator for California at that time, who said, as they all do, look at them all, Schumer, they all make statements. I'm here to protect Israel. In order to run for state assembly in California, Tom Hayden had to be brought before the Israeli consul in LA to be approved, to be the state assembly candidate for the Democratic Party. So Zionism, through its ability to convince people, and especially that, my generation and older people, that this is the way to be anti-Semitic, is to be pro-Israel. And this is something you just must do, and it makes you a good person. That is very, very powerful. It's the thing that has to be broken, okay? The commitment, and it was just an assumption. Nobody knew anything about Israel. They didn't know what happened in 1940. They didn't know. I met people who went through Eastern Studies programs, graduate school, never learned a thing about the Nakba. Okay, so there was ignorance. There was the excising of information and of knowledge. That's been overcome since at least the late 90s, since the Israeli historians did the work on it, Benny Maris, etc., and Ilan Pappad did the work on that. And now it's overcome by the internet and by people being able to learn what happened and what the actual history of Zionism is. And since, to my astoundment, since October 7th, young kids who didn't know anything about this, and they said, oh, let me find out what's going on here. I didn't realize what Zionism is. And Zionism is not something to be supported, period. And this is and they're willing to say, oh, so we have for the first time a real anti-Zionist movement in the United States. You couldn't even say the word Zionism. Even on some left platform, oh, we don't want you to use the word Zionism. Yeah. And because they didn't know what to say about it, what to do about it. But now you've got younger people and people who're learning about what Zionism is saying, Zionism is colonialism. It's terrible. And it is. And it is from the beginning. There's anybody who sits around thinking, oh, it's a great thing that this Jewish state of Israel was established in 1948 by doing what you're watching them do today, by killing and expelling 80% of the Palestinians. That's a great thing? No, it isn't. It's a terrible thing. Zionism has been the enemy of humanity since 1948. And the people who've been since for 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 years of their lives just saying, oh, it's a great thing having the state of Israel and this Jewish state. It's a wonderful thing. No, it's not. You've been a fool for saying that. And you've been supporting a vicious regime. It's like sitting around in 1990 saying, oh, it's a great thing we've had apartheid for the past 300 years, over 200 years in South Africa. No, it's not. It wasn't a great thing. It was never a great thing. It's not a great thing. It never was a great thing. It always was vicious colonialism. And if you supported it maybe because you were ignorant of what it was. But now you got to realize what it is because you can see it right now. Here, this is what it is and what it always has been. And that's a very hard thing for older generation, especially, to break. And what will you do? What will you do in order to prove that you're not guilty? If you feel guilty about something, if you're a divorced parent and your child makes you feel guilty, what will you not do for them? Okay. Now this is what you got to realize, really, truly, psychologically. This is what happens to Joe Biden's and Nancy Pelosi's. That we can't not be anti-Israel. That's a wonderful thing. Otherwise, we'll be anti-Semitic. And they're continuing to do that and continuing to do that. And it's been working for 76 years. It's now being broken. And I'm really glad to see it. But we've got a long way to go. And the people who are in power are not just, many of them are not just doing it psychologically. They're doing it because they are committed Zionists. They know what it is, many of them, and they don't care. They think that Israeli Jews have the right to colonize Palestinian Arabs, knowing exactly what colonization means. The same thing it meant in the Congo, the same thing it meant in South Africa. We have the right to do that because we Jews are better than those savages. And that's some of their position. But the more you see that happen, the more you see them saying that and acting that way in a blatant and undeniable way, the more you're going to have people saying, wait a minute, I don't want to be part of this. And that's happening now in the United States. I'm glad to see it happening, but it's got a long way to go. And it hasn't. It's not over the next 6 months going to stop the United States from supporting that program of colonization every possible way.
Right. There's interesting. There's harassment of dissident journalists. Scott Ritter is being harassed by the FBI. They banned him from leaving the country. Basically, they're trying to crack down on TikTok, which is dissemination of information. So yeah, it's interesting. There is a protest movement, and schools, colleges are going to reopen in a few weeks, and hopefully the 10 encampments will continue, and that'll be a factor. Pivoting slightly, Ukraine war is still going on. In fact, Ukraine invaded Russia, as I understand. It's kind of petering out predictably. I was surprised that the Ukraine war, I thought it would be over by now. But what do you think of the chances of escalating? It looks like they don't really have any way out either, although Ukraine itself is kind of depleted. I think they lost over 500,000 men, which is horrific. Ukraine, they don't have anyone left to fight with. They're beginning press ganging people in eastern Ukraine, Russian-speaking areas, and there's some resistance to this. How do you see the Ukraine conflict going?
Again, Ukraine is not going to defeat Russia. This is but they are. They're fighting. I did not expect it to go on this long either. And a lot of people thought, no, Russia will roll over Ukraine in half an hour or 2 weeks or whatever. That didn't happen. Ukraine had built up a NATO army over 8 years. Mm-hmm. It was the strongest army in Europe. It was NATO army, NATO supplied. They've been able to fight on. They cannot win against Russia. They are losing against Russia. Russia itself, over the past 2 years, 2.5 years, has rebuilt its own army in a certain sense, has reestablished a military-industrial complex on the basis of old Soviet planning systems that is very, very powerful. Okay, so Russia is going to win this militarily. You know, the question is whether, again, I said way back, the negotiations aren't going to solve. The only negotiation in this that's going to end this war is the terms of surrender. And if you think that's going to be Russia, you're kidding yourself. There'll be a nuclear war before that happens. Okay. The question is whether the European NATO, meaning the United States, but also its European puppets, will let Ukraine lose, will let Russia win. And I don't know the answer to that question. They have put themselves in a position where they're saying we cannot let Russia win because it will be the end of NATO, and it will. They're right. It'll be a devastating blow to NATO. So, but Russia, the more they make it clear to Russia that we're not going to let you win, the more Russia's going to say, well, guess what? We're going to win. I mean, we're going to make sure we do. So I don't know. This fighting is, Russia is winning the war now in the place where the real fighting is going on, which is in the Donbass. And the Ukrainians have pulled their troops out of that for this Kursk offensive, which is a bold little move, which is causing problems for Russia and does indicate that, Ukraine can get away with some things, and Russia is missing some elements of protection that it needs. Not going to change the course of the war. What's happening in the Donbass is, and Russia is winning on that front steadily, but they have to win. Russia has to create a situation which is undeniable victory, and where Ukraine has no choice but to give up the territory that Russia claims. Okay, and that's not settled yet. I think it will be, but there's a tremendous possibility, again, like the Middle East, for NATO to get involved in this in a way that's going to cause a wider war. And I think it's not out of the picture that NATO, through Poland or something else, will get directly involved in this. There's going to be NATO pilots, retired pilots flying these F-16s. They're not going to make that much difference anyway. And there are, apparently they've in other strikes, they killed NATO officers. And in this Kursk offensive, apparently there are British and German officers that are involved in it. And at some point, NATO is going to have to decide whether it's going to allow itself to lose or whether it's going to intervene directly. And I don't know what the answer to that will be. I am not at all confident that they will just say, okay, we really can't win this, so we're not going to get involved directly. I think at some point they'll get involved directly. They'll put a no-fly zone over Western Ukraine. They'll put in troops to defend Kiev. This is a red line now that we're going to bring NATO in directly to defend. Something like Odessa, Kiev, I'm not convinced they won't come in to defend that in some way. And that will be the beginning of this is a very possible nuclear war here. As I said in my article about that nuclear war, there's a 50-50 chance that NATO will get involved. There's a 50-50 chance that if they get involved, there'll be a nuclear war. I mean, that's not good odds.
Right. So it doesn't look too good. So it looks like we're tacitly already in a world war on several fronts. Taiwan to an extent, mostly Iran, Gaza, Iran, and then Ukraine. It's a scary situation. Finally, what do you think of the chances of a civil war in the U.S.?
Much of it until recently. I do think they really want that in some way.
Yeah, they seem to be pushing that.
Again, we're going to have an election that one side or another is going to say was rigged and cheated. Mm-hmm. And they're going to have good reasons to say that.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether Trump was cheated out of the election in 2001. I really don't. I didn't study it well enough, but I know very well that quite possibly was, because these electoral systems are so screwed up. Yeah. And this is going to happen again. Again, this is at the most basic level. As I said, they don't want to fix that. They don't want to fix it. Uh-huh. You have to fix that between the election, not the day after. Oh, I was cheated. Let's go to court. Courts cannot solve the forensic problems of whether electronic voting machines work. So you have to solve that problem politically in between elections. When you have good faith, let's have an honest, transparent electoral process that doesn't exist for for-profit companies to run with proprietary software and instrumentation. That's baloney. Right. This is going to be a completely public, open process. Should be no proprietary anything in an election. So but you know, they don't want to do that. They just don't want to do it. They like the system that they have, and they want it. They know they don't want people getting together and fighting against them. They want people fighting against each other. Right. Republicans fighting against Democrats. You cheated the election. You're an asshole. You're anti-democratic. You're a communist. I mean, this is absurd.
Yeah.
You know, the absurdity of it is part of the point. You know, they want people fighting over stupid, not necessarily stupid things, but fighting over things that should be easy to solve if you had good faith process of approach to solving, but there isn't. And so people are going to get pissed off. They are. I mean, people were pissed off at George Floyd. People were pissed off on January 6th. And if you don't solve those problems, it's going to get worse, and there's going to be more fighting, and they'll be fighting each other, and that's what they want. That allows the state to come in and say, we have to put down all this violence, and we have to stop people from talking on the internet because they're fomenting this violence and all that bullshit. And that's what they're trying to do all around the world.
Right. That's what I'm concerned about. The riots in the UK. They're using that as an excuse to crack down on freedom of speech, things like that. That's here. Okay, I'm going to have to go here. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Just a plea again to recognize what a disgrace to humanity was happening in Gaza and how we have to do everything we can to stop it. And I don't know how, but that's what our mind should be on. Who's going to be controlling Gaza in 6 months?
That should be the point.
Who's going to be controlling Gaza and the Israelis have no right to be anywhere near it. And that has to be resolved in some way. And it's only going to be resolved, I'm afraid, by force. Israel has no plan to give up control of Gaza, and we'll never have a plan and we'll never accept the plan to give up control of Gaza until it's forced to. So some powers in the world have to be able to force Israel to do that, and I don't know what it's going to be, and it's a very dangerous situation.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Well, thank you very much for spending your time, and I will hopefully have this posted in a day or so, and I'll send you a link.
Thank you very much. Always good to talk to you, Kate.
Okay. Bye-bye.